Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary and today's video is going to be my wrap up for the month of June. So if you have not been around here before, the way I structure these wrap ups is I will be going over my reading stats for the month first, and then I will go into the books that I read in reverse order from the ones that I enjoyed the most. So I will start with my lowest rated book and I will go up to my highest rated books. Without further ado, I'm just gonna jump into my reading stats for the month. So in June, I did manage to read 12 books. I DNF'd 3 books, and from the books that I finished, I read a total of 4,360 pages for genres that I read. And again, all of these stats are calculated for the books that I completed. I read 4 romance books, 2 general fiction books, 2 fantasy books, 1 sci-fi, 1 mystery thriller, 1 historical fiction, and 1 nonfiction. For the author genders, I read from 2 male and 10 female authors this month. I also read from 11 white and 1 Asian author. The countries that the authors that I read from are the United States, Australia, England, and Canada. I read 0 physical books yet again this month. I'm really not doing well with that goal to read 2 physical books a month. I'm just really failing at it, but I did manage to read 10 books via audio, and I read 2 ebooks. Demographic wise, I read 10 adult books and 2 young adult books. I did not read any translated works in the month of June. The books that I read were set in England/London, England for a lot of them, Vermont, Tennessee/Georgia for one, and New York City, as well as some fantasy worlds. I read 3 books that had queer rep this month. And for my star ratings, I gave 0 1 stars, 1 2 star, 1 3 star, 2 3.5 stars, 3 4 stars, and 5 5 stars, which is an average of 4 stars, which is really, really good. So I was enjoying a lot of what I read. And to be honest, had I finished the books that I DNF'd, they would have gotten at most a 3 star, likely a 2 star. But without further ado, I am just going to start by talking about the books that I DNF'd this month, just so you know. I won't go into too much depth, but I will just discuss them. So I did DNF A Dance with Dragons and the Game of Thrones series as a whole. I have started watching the TV show. I just realized that this series is never going to be finished. These books are so long, and I don't really love any of them. I also ended up DNFing River of Silver by S.A. Chakraborty, which is a series of short story collections that go along with her Daevabad trilogy, I believe is what the series is called. I just decided I don't care enough. I read the first story and was like, meh, and then I just decided I didn't care. I didn't end up loving that series overall, so I thought, why would I continue to read parts of this world that I don't really care about reading? And I'm not saying I will never come back and read that. It just, for right now, I don't care about it. And then the last thing that I DNF'd was actually These Truths by Jill Lepore, which I am disappointed by, but that is a 1,000-page history book, basically. I got 500 pages in and was like, I don't know that I want to read the rest of this. I'm disappointed in myself because that's been one of my goals for the year. My word of the year is learn, because I want to learn more things about things that I feel like I should know and the history of the United States. It's the country that I live in. I feel like I should know more about it. But ultimately, this book it was too long for me. I've sort of decided, I ended up taking off from my TBR all nonfiction books that are over 500 pages because I just don't want to read them. And I'm sorry if any of those really disappoint you. You can let me know in the comments below if you love any of those books and wish that I'd finished them. But at this point, it's just not gonna happen for me. Then starting with my 2-star read, the book that I did finish and I kind of wish I hadn't, I read A Girl from Nowhere by James Maxwell, which I believe was for my sci-fi prompt on my sorry board, but I could be wrong about that. And this is a sci-fi fantasy book about this guy who is living in, how do I even describe it? It's a planet that has what's called a firewall, and you can't really cross the firewall, it's too dangerous, but it's humans and these alien creatures who live here. And I thought this book was going to be about this female character who has the ability to kind of see the future. She's got really sharp hearing. It doesn't explain exactly how it works, but she basically can see the future and is really valuable for that reason. And so she keeps getting taken captive by people, but it's actually about a boy. It's called The Girl from Nowhere. It's about this boy who finds her, and I just didn't care about it. Every time I thought it was going to get interesting and be from her perspective, it lasted 5 seconds, and then we were back in his perspective. And sure, he has a tragic backstory where his parents are killed right in front of him by these ruffians, and he's injured, and he ends up having to go live with his aunt who lived with his family, but she has to take care of him, and she's not really maternal, and so she basically leaves him for dead and is if you can find your way back to the house after this severe injury. And he can't, something happens to his leg, his leg breaks, and so he's kind of crippled from then on out. And she's if you can find your way back to the house and take care of yourself, then you can stay alive, otherwise you'll die out here, and that's fine with me. And I just didn't really care about this book, to be honest. First of the books that I gave 3 stars was Dreaming of You by Lisa Kleypas, which is a historical romance book. And I read this and several other of the books that I'm going to talk about in this vlog, or in this video, in a vlog where I was trying to find read-alikes for the TV show on Hulu, The Artful Dodger, which is based on Oliver Twist and like a side character in Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, but like bumped up into the future where he grew up as a child thief. Now he's a surgeon in Australia in the prison colony. And there's like a romance aspect with him and then the governor's daughter. And I wanted to find books that felt like that because I love that show. This was the first of the books that I read for that vlog. So Dreaming of You by Lisa Kleypas is actually the second book in a series of books. The series is called The Gamblers of Cravens, and the main character, the main male character, is Derek Craven, who owns this like gambling club, and Sarah Fielding is a writer, and she's trying to write a story about a guy who owns a gambling club, so she wants to like kind of shadow Derek Craven, and he doesn't really want her there, and it's their romance between them basically. This book was fine. I didn't love it, but I liked it well enough. That was my first 3-star of the month. There was nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't quite hitting the way I wanted it to, and I think part of it is that my expectations were something that was very close to The Artful Dodger, and it wasn't as close as I wanted it to be. But it was still a really good book, and I think if you like all of these books sort of fall into the trope of the hero was like a homeless child who had to like make his way on the streets and somehow came into a fortune, and now he's like trying to live in society, and these are like society women. That's what all 4 of the historical romances that I read sort of had, that trope. If you like that trope, all of these I think would be good recommendations for you because it wasn't bad. The other thing that I said is that like certain sex scenes didn't really do it for me. The next books that I want to talk about that I gave 3.5 stars, both of these books are like super hyped on BookTube and in general. And so I feel like I just had really high expectations for them. The first one that I'm going to talk about is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Everyone talks about how much they love this book. And it's basically about this guy whose name I'm not going to remember now, who works the Department of Youth. Basically he's a social worker, and he goes and checks out foster homes in this magical world for kids with like magical abilities, and he makes sure that the foster homes are like running correctly, and that's like his job. And then he gets sent to this island, this house in the Cerulean Sea, if you will, where there are a bunch of like the most dangerous kids. He's going there to make sure that these kids are not a danger to society, basically. And while he's there, he like has this romance bloom with the guy who runs the house. And it's supposed to be like really heartwarming and sweet. And like it was, but also it was fine. You know, like I did enjoy it, but I don't really think it's something I'm going to think about very much. I did not really have any emotional responses to it the way that I've heard other people do. And maybe I'm just like cold hearted, but I just don't think this was the type of book for me. I do have another TJ Klune on my TBR, In the Lives of Puppets, which I believe is like a Baba Yaga retelling of sorts. So I am still interested in reading that, but this one didn't do it for me. So you can let me know if you agree or disagree with that, but like, it's a fine book, but I don't really understand the hype. Kind of piggybacking off of that, I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I had previously done a reading vlog where I read several popular dark academia books and talked about whether or not I liked them. And I knew when I went into that vlog that The Secret History is like kind of what people consider the first dark academia book. It's about this group of college students at a small liberal arts college in Vermont, and they are part of, I think they study classics and Greek in particular, and I think there's like 5 or 6 of them. And at the beginning of the book, you know that one of them gets murdered. You don't really know how the murder happens, and it gets unfolded to you. I will say, I thought that the murder was going to be like the big reveal, but it happens in the first half of the book. There's kind of like before this murder leading up to it, and then the aftermath of the murder, which I did think was a really interesting twist. I feel like tonally this book was really like accomplished at providing a tone for the reader of like unease. However, I didn't love this book the way that a lot of people love this book. Like I was never on the edge of my seat because there was never really a mystery. Like, you know, pretty early on who was murdered, which I feel like is a lot of these books or this type of thing. You don't know who was murdered and you don't know who has murdered them, but that's like revealed pretty early on. So it hasn't happened yet, but you know it's coming. Also, like, there wasn't enough focus on, at the risk of spoiling things, I won't go into too many details, but like the reason that this murder happens is because of another event that happens that the character whose perspective you are in is not present for. So you get to hear him being told about this event, but you don't get to experience it. And that could add to some people's like unease about it, but for me, it just didn't really work. This is the second Donna Tartt book that I've read and probably will be the last. I don't really like her writing style. So I also have sort of decided that maybe dark academia is not for me. I am gonna give a couple other things a try, probably. If We Were Villains by, is it Emil Rio? I don't know what the author's name of that book is off the top of my head, but I've heard that that is like Shakespeare. It's like the same thing where it's like a college cohort that are studying Shakespeare and there's like a murder that happens. It's like the dark academia trope or whatever. So I am interested in trying that still, but this one didn't do it for me, unfortunately. So I'm kind of sad about that. And now I have a lot of 4 stars to talk about. So the first 4 star I want to talk about is I Want to Show You More by Jamie Quattro, which was originally on my May TBR. And this is a short story collection, all set in and around this town in Tennessee/Georgia that's like right on the border. And it just follows like the lives of different families that live there and like different things that happen. I will say the first like 4 stories are all about a woman who is cheating on her husband, and they're different women. And I thought that was a really interesting twist because the full-length novel that I read by Jamie Quattro is about an affair. But I just find it odd that that's like what she tends to write about. I will say, I really liked several of these stories. So there is a collection of them that, it's like 3, I think, that follow the same family at various different times in their lives and through like the struggles that they go through. And I really enjoy when short story collections do that. Like I like when there are repeat characters in short stories and it sort of forms like a more cohesive story. I enjoyed that. So that aspect of it I really liked. There were some short stories in here that really like moved me, and then there were others that I just thought were fine. There's one in particular that's set at a church camp between 2 teenagers, and I loved that one a lot. There was another one about a woman who was training to run a marathon, and in this world, when you sign up to run a marathon, you get a statue and you have to carry the statue while you run, and everyone has like a different statue and you find out like sort of what the statues mean. And it was bizarre, but if you've been on this channel a while, you might know that bizarro short fiction is one of my favorite things. So that really worked for me, but there were other things that just didn't really work for me as well. But overall, I did enjoy it, and I think it is a good short story collection if you are in the market. But again, there are some short stories that I liked way more than others. The next books that I want to talk about that I gave 4 stars, I read for my read likes for the Artful Dodger vlog again. So we have Pippet and the Prince of Secrets by Grace Calloway, which is another second book in a series. But each of these, the like heroines in these stories are a part of this secret society, which is basically like Charlie's Angels, but in the Regency era, which I thought was really like fun and interesting. The main character of this one is Pippa. And when she's a child, she meets this boy whose name, I think his name is Tim, but she calls him Cull because his last name is like Cullen or Culver or something like that. And they meet when they're children. They don't really see each other again until they're adults. And when they're adults, he is now what's known as the Prince of Larks, which is this group of like child thieves. And he is kind of like a vigilante. And she is also kind of like a vigilante. And so their 2 groups are sort of teaming up, and that's how they get involved with each other. I thought this one was sweet. I really enjoyed it. Also, Pippa in this story is a widow. And so she is able to have certain freedoms in society that normally like an unwed woman would not have, because she's older than like marrying age and she's not really considered like on the market from what I understand. And again, I don't know how historically accurate this is, but it was a really fun like twist on like what she's allowed to do. So she elicits him to be in an affair with her because she's never really had like her lust satisfied, if that makes sense. But it is like their love story, and it was sweet. The next book that I gave 4 stars I also read for that vlog, which was Olivia Twist by Lori Langdon. And this is a YA retelling of Oliver Twist. But in this world, Oliver Twist is actually a girl named Olivia who was disguised as a boy for like her safety and survival when she was a child and a street urchin. And then at a certain point, she ends up finding her like extended family. And so she knew Jack Dodger, the Artful Dodger from the TV show, but also from the original work by Charles Dickens. And she knew him when she was a child. And then they separated because she sort of came up in society and like found out that she has this like tie to a wealthy family. And Jack convinces a wealthy woman to pretend that he is her nephew so that he can help like steal things for her because she has lost her fortune. And then they end up like running into each other again when they're like 18 or 20 or something. And then obviously the story goes from there. But I really enjoyed this one. I had a really fun time with it. and I liked the like subversion on the trope. And it also made me realize that like I've probably seen things that are Oliver Twist related. I've never seen like an adaptation of Oliver Twist, but I do see like a lot of similarities in certain like TV shows and movies that I have watched, which was really fun for me to see. And now we are finally on to my 5 stars. I have more 5 stars this month than I have of any other rating, and I'm so excited about that. But the first one that I want to talk about, since we're already talking about that vlog that I did, is The Rogue of Fifth Avenue by Joanna Shupe. And this book is set in New York City, so it's the most different in setting to the other ones that I read, which were all set in London. But it follows this girl whose dad is really wealthy for some reason, and then the main male character is an attorney, and he grew up really poor in like the slums of New York City at the time. And this is set right around turn of the century. So like late 1800s, very early 1900s, around when the movie Newsies was set, I believe, from what I gathered by things that were happening. But essentially our main female character is in this sort of scheme where she steals from the wealthy and brings it to the poorer people, and our main male character catches her doing this, and then one of the women that she was helping down in like the slums of New York ends up killing her husband in self-defense. And so our main female character convinces the main male character, who again is an attorney, to represent her in court, and sort of all the shenanigans that happen from there. I loved this book. It really worked for me. I liked the different setting from what the other books that I was reading. And also like I really enjoyed their romance aspect of things. There was a clear wall between them that like society would not let them marry, which again was like one of the things that I was looking for when I did this vlog. So I loved that book. Along the same lines, the last book that I read for that vlog, which ended up being like my favorite book that I read for that vlog, was Between the Devil and Desire by Lorraine Heath. And this, again, is a historical romance. And again, we follow a widow who has a young son, and her husband has just died, and he was much older than her, I believe. And so when he dies, they invite this other guy who she's never heard of before, named Jack, to come to the house for the will reading. And it turns out Jack has been left the entire estate, and he's also become the guardian of her son. And she doesn't understand why her husband would do this, but she and Jack butt heads at first and then eventually fall in love. And again, you have the like, she's a widow, so like society doesn't look as closely at her as they would an unmarried woman otherwise. And I just really liked it. I felt like their chemistry was really, really good. I really enjoyed their banter, their back and forth, and like the way that their relationship started on such a wrong foot, but they sort of worked through things and ended up feeling like very strongly for each other. I really like this one. This one does have a weird twist, if you will, at the end. No pun intended, because it's Oliver Twist retelling. That was funny. I don't know. I didn't know how to feel about that, but I did see it coming. Like, it was kind of obvious to me what was happening, but then I still, if you think about it too hard, it does make you feel weird. But it was good. I liked it. The next book that I gave 5 stars was The End of Everything Astrophysically Speaking by Katie Mack, which is a nonfiction book about how physicists think the world is going to end, basically. And I love this book. I thought it was really well written, really well researched, not too long, and written in a way that like someone who does not have a strong science background can understand. So she does go into like kind of complex theoretical physics concepts, but she explains them in a way that I thought was easily digestible for a person who has not taken a physics class since they were 16. I really enjoyed this book, and I found it very informative and almost like illuminating for certain things that are prevalent in science fiction, like about dark matter and things like that. So I really, really enjoyed this book. Also in June, I finished another book that was on my May TBR, which was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, which is the first book in a like series of series from her set in Ravka. And it basically, how do I describe this book? I didn't know what this was about going into it, because I guess I only knew the plot of Six of Crows, which this is not. In this world, certain people have like magical abilities, and you can tell what their magical ability is because they wear like a certain color robe, right? And so our main characters are kind of soldiers in this world. One of them is a cartographer, so she makes maps. And then her childhood best friend is this guy, Mal, who is a soldier. And she's always kind of been in love with Mal, but Mal has eyes for other people because he doesn't realize that she's always been in love with him. You know, it's one of those. And she ends up being found out through like the events of the story. There's like a situation where Mal is put in danger, and she emits this like bright light. And the main, like most powerful person with powers is this guy called the Darkling. And the Darkling has the ability to like create darkness. And she has the ability to create light, but she never knew that she had this until well after, when children usually discover that they have these abilities. Like usually you figure it out when the kid's like 6 to 10, right? And she's like 18 or 20 or something. So she's like grown. Anyways, she gets found out, and she gets taken to the like palace of this world to be trained in her ability. And then the story kind of goes from there. I don't want to spoil anything that happens, but there is, of course, the classic YA love triangle, which again, I mentioned this in another video because I saw a TikTok about love triangles and how love triangles, when they're done well, one of the love interests represents like the path that the character has always been on, and the other love interest represents a change. And so it's like, it's not about the boys, right? It's about the character deciding what path to go down in their life. And ever since then, that's what I look at love triangles for, and I don't get annoyed by them anymore, which is miraculous, because when they're well done, they can be well done. And I enjoyed the love triangle in this. I am a little bitter about the way that things went, and I'm nervous to pick up book 2 because of the way that book 1 ended. And I won't spoil it, obviously. I do plan on reading the rest of the books in the series and picking up Six of Crows, and then I think King of Scars is another like spin-off series for this. I don't really know how to feel about it, but I did really end up loving it. And at first I thought I was gonna get annoyed by the main character, but I ended up really loving her. Like, I thought Mal was annoying at first. I thought the Darkling was annoying at first. I thought all of these characters were so annoying, but the more I read, the more I was like, I am invested in them, which is something. Another book that I gave 5 stars this month was In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. This is my last 5-star. I don't know that it was ultimately my favorite book that I read, like, of all of them, but if you've been here, you know that I'm a Ruth Ware girly through and through. I do love me a Ruth Ware book. Yes, I do. I've only read one that I wasn't super fond of, and that was The Death of Mrs. Westaway. I did not like that book that much. Like, I thought it was fine. I guess also The It Girl I liked, but didn't like as much as I've liked any of the other ones. Those are my 2 like bottom tier, but the other ones that I read by her, I love. And In a Dark, Dark Wood was no exception. So this is following a main character whose name I never remember their names, so I'm not gonna know her name, but she gets invited to the Hindu or bachelorette party of a woman that she has not seen since like she was a teenager, right? So she's like, I don't understand why I was invited to this really. And she goes to this woman's Hindu, and it's like in this secluded mountain setting. And the story kind of unfolds from there. Let me look up what it says on the Goodreads page so I don't spoil anything for you. Okay, yeah. So it doesn't say anything else about what happens, but it says, as the first night falls, revelations unfold among friends, old and new. An unnerving memory shatters Leonora's reserve. Leonora is the main character. And a haunting realization creeps in. The party is not alone in the woods. It was really good. I loved it. I thought that the tension was built marvelously. I think Ruth Ware does a really good job of like slowly building tension up and then having it all snowball down. Like, I think she's a master at that, right? In the books that I've read. And I read her for her very tense atmospheres. And so I don't think she writes like fast-paced thrillers the way that some thriller authors do. But again, I think she does such a good job of building the tension that it feels almost like an old school mystery at first, and then again snowballs into something more dramatic than that. But that is the last book that I'm going to talk about today. Those are the 12 books that I read in the month of June. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books and how you felt about them. Also, let me know what you read in June. Like, what was your favorite book that you read in June? Did you DNF anything in June? I would love to know. But that's going to be it for this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more content from me, because I do post 2 videos every week, and I will see you in the next one.